welcome back to my channel, See in Sco. This is Insia, and if you're new here, welcome. And if you're returning for my part 2 of this ADHD, obesity, GLP-1 drugs conversation, thanks for coming back, especially after my last video. So I wanted to just kind of go a little bit more into what I was referring to and why I believe like these GLP-1 drugs are making such a difference for those of us that have been struggling with ADHD and obesity, especially since people who have ADHD have been dealing with obesity at almost like a 70% rate. That's wild. Is that not crazy to you? Like, I don't know if everyone knows that, but goodness. One of the things I was like thinking about very heavily recently is the idea that people with ADHD, and there's some other disorders that also do this, but I just want to stay focused on ADHD here. So yeah, let's see if that works. Eating for stimulation, so like stim eating or stimming food, like different ways of saying this. Essentially, like, I can distinctly remember whenever I would study that I would need like something to be eating or drinking to stay focused and alert. Now, most of my educational career, like, I did it without any medication, any Adderall or any version of stimulant, because I was not diagnosed till I was 26. So I had to come up with like alternate techniques to be able to keep my eyes on the page. And there's so many more tools out there now than there were when I was trying almost 15 years ago. So I just worked really hard to get creative, especially because I was trying to pursue some very grandiose things, such as trying to go to med school. And going to said med school and things not working out as I hoped because I had undiagnosed ADHD. And medical school, if no one told you this, is a lot about focusing, using every minute and maximizing it, and immediate recall. There's so much like memorization and recall, and that is such a great problem for me and for many people with ADHD. So I did a lot of schooling. I worked really hard coping, masking, as some know in the ADHD industry or lifestyle, to get by and study as hard as I could without any real medication that my brain needed. So what I did was I would eat. I would have like, I can remember distinctly, there was a vending machine in my college that had like honey mustard Snyder's pretzels. And if I needed to do a late night study session, which is almost the only way I studied, cramming, I had to have a big bag of this next to me in order to like be able to stay attentive and alert. And that's just empty calories at snack time during a meal period that I should not even be eating for, right? So of course, when I was in my young 20s, making those choices did not have such an immediate reaction. I've always been overweight, but I've definitely become morbidly obese in my 30s, and I was able to kind of like veer, like I was in the high 200, not high 2, I'm sorry, I was in around the 200 mark in my like later 20s, crossing over into like 220 after that, and I'm like 5'5", 5'6" for perspective on my weight height distribution. And I was lucky that I also like in the earlier days, as I gained weight like fairly proportionally, so it wasn't as obvious to me the impact of these like late night study sessions, right? I also needed to, I was sugar was like a huge thing for me, which is very common in the ADHD community. So specifically caffeine. So if you're not medicated, you're like trying to find your own medication. Typical medication for ADHD is stimulants, and what is a commonly found stimulant in the world? Coffee. So I can even remember like when I was in middle school, my mom would make me like a cup of coffee. Okay, it would be like a dash of instant coffee in a tall glass of milk. I'm not sure like why. My best guess is that she realized that I needed something like this in order to like focus in school. If I did not have that, if I didn't have my cup of coffee in the morning, I had these like jokes with my friends about like how I just had no ability to focus in class. The idea of ADHD was like wild to me. I would have never expected that my whole, like most of my life. Sure, I'd like suspected on occasion, but not in any real context, because I thought this was normal. I thought like the way my brain worked was normal. Now at 35, I've realized that the science has shown that the way that my brain works is very far from normal. Okay, well that's extreme. I love myself, I love my brain. I would love my brain more if it didn't work against me as often as it does. And that's really what I'm referring to here. These difficulties that I have because of ADHD has led me into some like really hard habits. And another thing about like, there's the idea of eating for stimulation. So in order to stay alert, stay focused, like you're just like having to, even chewing gum, that's a much better option than eating bags of pretzels if you have to pick something. But there's that aspect of it, and then there's the dopamine seeking aspect of it. So something about people with ADHD is that we may have, so this is not necessarily the case for everybody, but specifically those that suffer with like inattentiveness symptoms, which is me, suffer with lower levels of dopamine than what is average. And then also we seem to absorb the dopamine much faster as well than our non-inattentive ADHD or just like the average person. So what that leads to is this like more like this addictive like personality where you're searching for dopamine highs. So food is one that is very clear result, especially if you're having something that's like high carbs, sugar, something like salty or sweet, something that has like a lot of flavor, and it hits those taste buds. It also hits your dopamine. That's your reward system of the brain. Okay, so when you're eating something and you're like, let's just say you're eating some popcorn, okay, because this is like very true to my life. You're eating popcorn and all of a sudden that salty flavor hits your mouth, and you are getting this like, oh, this is so good reaction, but it's disappearing very quickly, so quickly that you're like, I must keep going. So you're having more than maybe somebody else who is enjoying their popcorn, maybe. And another thing is that not only do we have less dopamine and more quickly process it, we also seem to have, there's studies that are showing that we might also have like a more stronger reaction to it. So like we feel that hit and oh, it feels so much better than it might for somebody else. And that learning this stuff is like so useful to me, because like me and my husband will eat similar food. He says he enjoys it, but like I'm always like, what do you mean? You don't seem to like really enjoy it. This is like so good. And he's just like, it's good. Like I don't know what's going on. And now I know, like our brains are just wired so differently that I'm getting like so much more from this eating experience than maybe I should be. So that encourages us to eat more, hence the huge link of obesity with ADHD. That's really hard. Like, that's really hard to work my brain around now. Like, to understand what I was doing was like a search for a chemical reaction, something that my body should be able to manage better than it's been managing, and I'm just doing the best I can, and this is what happened. So there are healthier ways of getting that dopamine fix. Like, if you work out, you know, you're likelier to you can increase your dopamine in your system by that workout high. You can also achieve that with other stuff that I can't think of right now, because that's outside of my short-term memory. I will get back to you on that. But anyway, back to the point. The other thing is that, like, people with ADHD have a hard time, like, being aware of yourself. So let's say you are enjoying this, like, dopamine fix of eating this salty popcorn, okay? And you can't stop because it tastes so good, but it, like, disappears. The enjoyment disappears so quickly that you're like, I must continue to feed my brain, my body, with what it's enjoying. And then to add to it, you're also struggling for self-awareness. So your body is like, at some point, is going to reach a level that it is done eating, that it has received enough nutrition, that it does not need anything more. But when you have ADHD, you're not paying attention to those body cues. So there's a lot of complicated things that are still yet to be understood with the brain, and specifically how people with ADHD struggle, and what is so different with our brain. But there's something to be said where either we don't recognize that our body is full, or our brain can't. Like, it could either be a matter of inattentiveness, that we're just not paying attention to our own self. So you have to work hard at being mindful when you're eating, not multitasking, not doing other things. Like, focus on the food so you can try your best to catch those cues. Or our body might not be getting strong enough cues as others may. So enter these GLP-1 medications. Some of the things that GLP-1 medications do is slow the release of dopamine. Now, these aren't like its main reaction, but the reality is that there are GLP receptors all over our body. Typically, the GLP protein, when it comes into our body, it is absorbed within a minute or two. Like, it's a very quick life. So it can't really get very far in that time, or if it does, it may not be, it may be absorbed by the time it gets there. So the GLP-1 medication that we've been given can last in our body so much longer that they're able to travel to different places and work in different ways. So even if our bodies naturally made GLP-1, why we're learning this when using these GLP-1 medications is that these proteins are moving all the way to our brain, and they're working with our brain in a way that is slowing down the release of dopamine. So that's essentially like, if you slow it down, you're not feeling that like, ooh, immediate fix. Like, it just is like a more neutral experience, right? And then also it like slows down the absorption in general. And the ability for it to slow down the absorption is also very important, because we have an opportunity to pay attention and feel it. So I say all that, and it's very important for you to understand that, like, you still need to put in the work for self-awareness, but you have now, if you are lucky enough to be on these GLP-1 medications while you've struggled with your ADHD symptoms and found it impossible to lose weight, these medications are changing everything. You know, like the real research is focused right now on GLP-1 medication working towards helping alcoholism or drug addiction. And there's a significant history already about sharing medication between medication used to support addictions and obesity. It has a lot to do with this dopamine reward system pathway and how people who struggle with addiction have these different workings of our brain. So I know some of that is depending on my audience here, that might make complete sense, or that I had lost you quite a while ago in this conversation, but there's already so much that is difficult for somebody who has ADHD. Like, life in general is very hard. We have been just trying to get into work this morning. I'm incredibly late. And why? Because not everything I needed was where it needed to be. I always think I will take X amount of time to do something, and then I take 5 million more hours to do that same exact thing than I anticipated. My brain is running constantly, so I'm just like shift tasking, thinking, oh, I have to do this, oh, I have to do this, oh, I have to do this. Before I left, I realized I needed to go I didn't have all my work stuff in one place, so I'm going through the house, which is very dangerous, because as I go through the house, I see other things that need to get done. And some of this is like mom brain, you know, that's not just for me, but for me, I'm struggling to like stay on my task of leaving the house to go to work, and that's a problem. So there's already enough difficult things in my life that I'm dealing with, and that's not like solved with these medications, because it takes a lot of behavioral changes to do that, and I can only do so many changes at once. Like, we're all human. We have to like work hard at taking it easy on ourselves and habit stacking and prioritizing what matters most, and going from there. Hopefully my work forgives me and understands. But thankfully they do, and I have some support and a little flexibility to do what needs to get done. Anyway, I digress. My point is that there's so much to know about how ADHD, GLP-1, and obesity are going to link each other. I'm not saying right now that somebody who has ADHD should get GLP-1 medication unless you already had a need for it or a benefit of it due to struggling with obesity for a significant period of time. That's really what I'm saying. I'm saying if you are already in that 70% of people with ADHD that have been struggling with obesity, but of that 70%, if you're already somebody who has specific issues with eating for stimulation and that like addictive eating, this might be what you've been looking for. I didn't realize the relationship between these things, and holy moly, it's changed my life. So I advocate for you, if you were debating about GLP-1 medication but just couldn't justify it, but you have been struggling with ADHD, maybe this is something you need to start talking to your doctor about. All right.